All right, it is time to dive into the Cardinals roster news from Sunday, as we got a lot of updates, some of which we very much did not expect, as the Cardinals threw some curveballs our way when it comes to the opening day 26-man roster. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Sunday, March 23rd, 2025, and it is unofficially official at this point. We know who the Cardinals 26-man roster is going to be. And according to a lot of reports from Jupiter, we have some updates on the direction the Cardinals are ultimately going with a lot of these roster battles. I'm going to give it all to you coming up in just a moment. But real quickly, before we get into the meat and potatoes, I want to let you know about Kevin Foley with Universal Windows Direct. For over 20 years, Universal Windows Direct has been upgrading homes across St. Louis. But if you want the best in the business, you need to talk to Kevin. With expert advice, unbeatable deals, and a passion for perfect windows, Kevin will help you find the perfect fit for your home. And right now, if you buy 2 windows, you'll get 2 free. Plus, you can ask about special financing offers. So don't wait. Call or text the number on your screen, 618-520-1234 today to schedule your free estimate. And you'll be saying, I love my windows from Universal Windows Direct. That's Kevin Foley. Again, the number to call or text, 618-520-1234 if you're in the market for new windows. He's a huge Cardinals fan. You can't go wrong with supporting Kevin and supporting b-schaeff Daily when it comes to your window needs. Okay, let's talk this roster. The biggest surprise, perhaps, is that Matthew Liberatore is in the starting rotation. We talked about this yesterday, myself and Ethan Hannaford on Sports Hub STL's Card Sub 365, that Libby was making that start on Saturday, and it seemed like it was notable to me. We talked at length about it yesterday. Could the Cardinals maybe shake this thing up a little bit and extend Liberatore out? And if it looks good, that could end up being notable for the opening day roster. And it was hard to picture because I just didn't know how it would fit together, but that's ultimately what the Cardinals have decided to do. So here's the news, and then we'll talk about evaluating and analyzing it. Liberatore is in the rotation. It's going to be a 5-man rotation to begin the season with Steven Matz in the bullpen in a long relief role. Despite the fact that he had a really good spring, the 2.29 ERA, he's starting as a reliever. But as of April 16th, after the off days begin to fade away from the schedule with the frequency that we're going to see over the first couple of weeks of the season, they're going to add Steven Matz back into a 6-man rotation. And that's interesting. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but I think that's a perfectly fine way to display it as of now, because you don't know what's going to happen over 2.5, 3 weeks. Injuries could happen. A lot could change between now and then. So just say, hey, Matz, you're in the bullpen for now, but we're going to prioritize getting you a spot in the rotation by mid-April, even if we have to go to a 6-man rotation. All right? I don't think that's ideal for the Cardinals, but I think it's a fine way to handle it for now. I am in favor of what they're doing with Matthew Liberatore, giving him a spot. Now, the disappointment is obviously going to come with Michael McGreevy, who is not on the open day roster. He's going to start the season in AAA Memphis, despite being statistically the Cardinals' best performer this spring as a pitcher, a 1.08 ERA from McGreevy, 12 strikeouts in 16 2/3 innings, so not a ton of Ks, and I don't think you'll get a ton of Ks from him, but that doesn't mean he can't be an effective performer at the big league level, and it would have been really nice to see McGreevy in there. But I'm okay with the opening day rotation not being the rotation that you necessarily see when you get to the quarter pole, when you get midway through the season, when you get toward the end of the season. I'm okay with the Cardinals taking this as it comes and being able to evaluate guys. And again, this is, I think, an example of the types of moves that Cardinals fans have been asking for. Whether specifically you meant Liberatore when you were asking for it, this is the result of that, of the Cardinals treating this like it's a transition year and prioritizing somebody who has a chance to be in a prominent role for the Cardinals in 2026, like Matthew Liberatore. If he sticks around and if he pitches well in this role, you've solved a rotation spot for next year. Instead of yanking him back and forth, the Cardinals are now going to do the opposite. They're going to say, we're going to put you in the role at which you could be your most valuable to the team, which is as a starting pitcher. And we're going to see if you can do it. And if you can't, then at least we'll know that for next year, and you can bump down to a relief role permanently, or we trade you, or whatever we do. But here's that opportunity. Steven Matz, you've been really good this spring. Liberatore's been better. ERA in the ones. I think it's around 1.6, and he was really good yesterday. 4 innings, 1 run allowed for Libby. Matz, you're going to start in a relief role. I know it stinks because you pitched well this spring, but this is what we're doing, and sorry. That's exactly what the Cardinals have refused to do with veteran players for years. And this transition year, I think, affords them the luxury to say, hey, man, I know it's not what you want, but we care more about what Liberatore wants than what you want. We care more about what Liberatore can potentially be as a ceiling player for us down the road, and you're not going to be on the team next year. That's the unspoken part of that, telling Steven Matz he's got to go to the bullpen at least to begin the season. And look, maybe he pitches really well and they want to re-sign him, and that's all fine and dandy. That's a high and balloon decision in October and November. But for now, like, Liberatore is going to be under team control for next year. Steven Matz is not. And even though Steven Matz pitched really well, Liberatore was better. And Liberatore has upside for 2026 and beyond that Matz contractually does not have. So this was, on paper, an easy decision to make. It's just not the decision we've ever seen the Cardinals make. So I was skeptical that they would do it. And so they did. Credit to them. And look, I think Steven Matz is in a spot where he's pitching well so he can help the team. It'll be interesting to see how they keep him loose for the beginning of the season before he joins the rotation on April 16th. And again, that's what they're saying now they'll do, but there's a lot of things that could change for between now and then that may change the dynamic of that. That's still 3 weeks away or so before April 16th arrives. A little more than 3 weeks, in fact, from today. About 3 weeks from opening day. So I think that's actually a credit to the Cardinals that they made this move with Libby. Because, again, I don't know how he'll do, but he looked good in spring. And if you're trying to build the best roster you can for the future, Liberatore being involved in the rotation should be a priority over Steven Matz being involved in the rotation because of the contracts and the team control and the notion of what you could establish for 2026 and beyond with this decision today in early 2025. So credit to the Cardinals for that. The McGreevy thing stinks, but again, I don't mind it because I don't think, as much as people said you should have cut Steven Matz and Michaelis, we're going to see Steven Matz pitch in a bullpen role. We're going to see him join the rotation at the point in time that he does. And he's pitched well in spring, so he could provide positive value to your team. Yes, it's a transition year, but I still think that having Steven Matz, rather than kicking him to the curb while he's pitching well, literally cutting him or trading him for nothing just to be able to get McGreevy in the opening day rotation, or really the opening day bullpen, because Matz is not in the opening day rotation, would not be the right course of action. So I'm supporting what the Cardinals are doing, keeping Steven Matz on the team, but in a role that allows him to have to be the one who is flexible rather than asking Liberatore, the young player, to be flexible, or asking McGreevy to be flexible. Hey, man, you made the roster, but we're going to kind of yank you around like we've done Libby the last few years. Nope, you're going to start in AAA Memphis. I know it's disappointing. We'll see you very, very soon. Just continue to do the things you did in spring, and it's all going to work out. It's a bummer that McGreevy's not on the team because he earned the right to be, but the Cardinals, I think, are doing right by Liberatore this time. And it's going to be the prove-it year for Liberatore if he can be a starter. We'll never have to ask the question again after this year. That's the way I think the Cardinals are trying to approach this. And I support it. With McGreevy, you'll see him sooner than later, in my opinion. Here are ways that can happen. Michaelis struggles in the first month of the season, and they cut him because he's in the same boat as Matz. They don't owe him anything other than the money for the rest of the year. And it can be a cutthroat business, and we all like Miles Michaelis, but he's got to pitch well or he hasn't earned his spot in this rotation for 6 months. He's going to have to pitch well to keep his spot, and I think that's the way it's going to go. I think today's moves show a window into that a little bit more because, look, if they didn't do it with Matz, we would be like, yeah, who knows if the Cardinals are going to play this like a transition year like we want them to. This move is creative and a little bit puzzling at times, but I also think when you break it all down, it makes some sense. Prioritize Liberatore. He's the guy who's going to be here next year. Michaelis is not going to be here next year, so as much as you like his veteran status and all that, if he doesn't pitch well, you've got McGreevy waiting, and I think that swap could be made, and then maybe you stick with a six-man rotation, or the obvious thing that could happen over the course of 3 weeks, somebody gets hurt, and McGreevy's, going to gain an opportunity like that. Now, the first guy to probably slide in is going to be Matz from bullpen to rotation if there's an early injury. And then the question is, do they yank McGreevy back and forth, make him that long reliever, and try to keep him ready to assume the next rotation spot that opens up, but do it from a bullpen role in St. Louis? I'm sure that would be his preference. Nobody would rather be in Memphis than St. Louis, but I think for his development, I'd almost rather him stay as a starter in Memphis. But we'll see. Time's going to tell on that. Bullpen-wise, Roycroft made it, Leahy made it. That's kind of what we figured would happen. There's really no surprises from that. And again, all of this is coming from reports down in Jupiter. I'm obviously not there, but everybody's saying the same things, and so I don't think it's going to be much of a scandal of a question. We kind of know what it is now, and we'll continue to talk our way through it here. Let's talk position player stuff. This tweet from Katie Wu. How do I say this? I haven't mentioned it yet. Victor Scott's on the team. You already knew that. But I decided to start with pitching, and then I got 10 minutes into the podcast, and I forgot to tell you. It's okay. The title of the video will tell you. Victor Scott's on the team. He's the opening day center fielder. Michael Siani is on the team as a fourth outfielder / defensive replacement. I told you I just could never envision Lars Nootbaar playing center field. Ollie Marmol doesn't want to write his name at center field. He wants to have, rightfully, I think, a stalwart defensively in center field. Siani was the incumbent, so he seemed like the guy at the beginning of spring that it would end up being. Victor Scott earned the job. 4 home runs, 5 stolen bases, a 1,200 OPS, a partridge, and a pear tree. He did everything he could to earn the job. The Cardinals are giving him the job. It's the right move. We'll see how he does. If it doesn't go well, I could see him being optioned. Siani sliding into more of that playing time. We go back to considering more of Lars Nootbaar in center field. But for now, it's going to be Victor Scott, and it should be. And I think your opening day lineup is relatively predictable, other than the Burleson Gorman conundrum, which I think is still unanswered. I think it is probably going to be Burleson over Gorman, if I had to guess. Call it a gut feeling. But I think you could see Wynn, Nootbaar, Contreras, Arenado, Donovan, Burleson. Maybe Herrera 6th, Burleson 7th, Walker 8th, Victor 9th. You could also change it up and give Victor the leadoff job. I wouldn't have a problem with that. A lot of ways they can go, but I think your 9 is going to be a pretty good 9, and we'll see if they can take this opportunity and run with it and turn the Cardinals into a pretty solid offense this year. We'll see. Gorman is the question. Hadn't had a great spring. Has been ill in recent days. What do you do between him and Burleson? Thomas G., I'm reading the replies to Katie's tweet right now about some of the roster stuff. He said, Katie, how will Burleson still get 400-plus at-bats with this construction? No backup shortstop either, with Wynn struggling in spring and having wrist issues. Why do they keep toying with Liberatore when he thrives in relief? Thomas not a fan of the route that they went. I actually disagree with Thomas. I don't think this is toying with Liberatore at all. This is giving him what he wants, which is to be a starter, and keeping him in one spot. And if he earns it, he keeps it. And if he doesn't, no more toying. You're just a bullpen guy. He has thrived in relief. Starter is a more valuable role. So I don't agree with that take. The Wynn stuff is interesting. Let's talk about this, because who didn't make the roster that they told us would, or at least it was reported would, and Katie reported that Jose Fermin was told he was on the team, and then they told him otherwise. That's the guy that was going to be the 26th man, and now it's Siani. Siani fits as a fourth outfielder. Victor doesn't. So Victor's going to have to start. Ollie Marmol's going to have to write Victor and not Siani. But Ollie Marmol wasn't going to write Fermin, ever. Especially not at shortstop. I've talked about this, that he's never played a big league inning at shortstop. So I didn't see the fit of him as that 26th man over a guy like Barrero, who I think they would trust to be a shortstop. But Barrero isn't making the team either. They're just not going to have a backup shortstop, which means Mason Wynn, your name gets written every day, 162 times. Brendan Donovan, Katie Wu reporting, could fill in when needed as a backup shortstop, but that they really don't have one on the team. And it goes back to when I asked Ollie, like the second day of spring, if they wanted to get looks from Donovan at shortstop this spring. And I don't remember his answer, but paraphrasing it, it didn't sound like it was going to be a priority. And I haven't seen it. I haven't watched every game, but I haven't seen Donovan take a rep at short in a game. It sounds like one of those deals where in a pinch they'll do it, but otherwise Mason Wynn is starting. The wrist thing does make that a little bit tricky. And I personally would probably bat Mason Wynn 9th instead of leadoff. And I would put Victor Scott at the top and rearrange it however you need to. Maybe you don't. Maybe Nootbaar just stays second and you ignore the right, left, right that it seems like they always feel they need to have. You'll have it throughout a lot of the lineup, but you could go Victor, Nootbaar, Wilson, Arenado, Donovan, Herrera, Burleson, Walker, Wynn, and you have a little bit of right at the bottom. It is what it is. I think that would be perfectly fine. And then Gorman could obviously slide in wherever, if it's Burleson's spot or whatever needs to happen, if Gorman's in the lineup on a given day. I think that would be perfectly fine. And I think with the struggles of Wynn and the wrist stuff, I don't know. I think you're asking a lot of him to be able to to thrive in a leadoff spot that, from an on-base standpoint, he didn't thrive in last year. So we'll see what they do with that. I think it's an interesting conversation to be had. But what it suggests to me that Fermin misses the team, he was told he made it, reportedly. And so that they shouldn't have done that. I mean, come on. You don't have to put your foot in your mouth from a PR standpoint with something like that. Now, again, I haven't seen the Cardinals say, hey, we told Fermin. I saw Katie report that they told Fermin, and so I'll trust her judgment on that. And if that's what happened, that's a real bummer. Just it was avoidable. You didn't need to do that. But I think these decisions, what it tells you is they were coming down to the very bitter end. If I had to guess what happened, and I am just guessing, I haven't asked. I probably should. But just my read on it would be, all right, what we know to be true is that Fermin has never played a big league inning at shortstop. The only reason to have that spot on the bench is if you feel like you need that on your roster somewhere. And if they don't feel like they do, and Fermin doesn't really fit that anyway, he's a righty bat off the bench, but you have Luke and Baker for that. So are you really going to need a second righty bat off the bench? And is Fermin the guy that you turn to for a big pinch hit spot late? It's going to be Baker for those spots. So otherwise, what is Fermin providing value-wise to the roster? Not a lot, and Siani's value is clear. You could really go with a super outfield defensively late in games. You could have Victor, Siani, and presumably Nootbaar as your defensive alignment in the outfield to finish off some of these games when you're up by a run or two. And that could be very valuable. I wonder who would play center. Probably Siani, which is why I think we saw Victor Scott II in right field in today's lineup. I think I saw that. So that is compelling to me. But Victor's going to be the starting center fielder. And Siani will actually get some usage. So I imagine that might have been a conversation between manager, front office, working through this, going, look, Siani is somebody that we could obviously use late in the game. Fermin, I'm not going to write his name over Mason Wynn's name, so what are we doing? You wish they could have maybe had that conversation, if that's the way it went down, before they told Jose Fermin he made the team, as it was reported they did. I think that's bad form, but I think Siani as a fourth outfielder does provide more value to the roster than Fermin, and especially with the way that I expect them to use those players. Again, you don't really need a backup infielder on your bench. I said this weeks ago. You don't actually need it because technically you'll have one. Whether Burleson's on the bench and Gorman's playing, you've got Brendan Donovan out there as well that could sub in at any infield position, including evidently shortstop, they believe. But you don't really need that on your bench. You might have to burn the DH in a given day, whatever. But if Gorman's on your bench, you have that extra infielder anyway. If Burleson's on your bench, you have that extra infielder. He's just probably in an outfield spot or as the DH on that given day too. So I don't really think the value of Fermin superseded the way they can use Siani. And for me, Siani doesn't really have a lot left to prove in Memphis. Like, sure, he could work out his at-bats there, I suppose. But I think his value to the Cardinals is greater as a guy coming off the bench. Now, you've got to trust that Oliver Marmol is going to use him in that way. And I think those conversations had to have happened between him and the front office. Like, give me Siani. I promise not to overuse him in the starting lineup over a guy like Vic. And we'll be good to go by our ability to close out games with a Gold Glove caliber outfield, left to right. And he's going to carry more value in that role than what Fermin brings. Fermin draws the short straw. It stinks for him. Again, like I said, poor form if they really did tell him that he made the team and then he didn't. But I think that tells you how late in the game these conversations were happening and these debates were ongoing. And where they landed, I actually think is right. I think this is you've got Lukin to be that bat off the bench, a righty when you're facing a tough lefty reliever. You have, I think, now what you're squeezed a little bit on is, and we'll see how this plays out, you are squeezed a little bit on infielders because you have to give up a DH because you only want to bat Baker, but you batted him for somebody who you then don't have anybody on the bench to fill the spot necessarily. Like, I'm trying to think, would they bat Luke and Baker for Vic? Okay, Siani can come in to play center field and won't have to bat in that game if it's like the 8th inning or whatever. Would they bat Luke and Baker for Burleson? Probably not, because I think they want to give him those opportunities. Would they bat him for Gorman? They probably would, I think, depending on, where they're at with what they want to prioritize with Gorman. Having that tough left on left at bat, or we're tied, we need this hit, we need to win the game. Going to be so freaking interesting. People are like, I'm for the first time ever, I don't care about the Cardinals season starting. forget that, dude. I am pumped for this season because of all the intricacies that I think we're going to see in the way that like the next chapter gets written of this organization. We're going to see on the fly what the future of the Cardinals looks like and who gets prioritized and who ends up performing. Everybody's going to get their opportunities, but who ends up performing to kind of start carving out the future? Who's going to be extended? Who's going to be traded? Like, this is a season where we're going to find out a lot about what the Cardinals can look like down the road. And Chaim Bloom is not in charge of the decisions yet, but that's why everything's kind of in a holding pattern. Nobody got a contract. Nobody got traded. Everybody's just going to let the chips fall where they may, and then the next guy gets to decide what to do with that information. I think it's going to be a really compelling season of Cardinal baseball. I really do. And the way that they did the roster, again, I didn't have this on my bingo card because I didn't know how to say yesterday on Card Sub 365 with Ethan. I didn't know how to say, hey, they're doing this because it seems like they're still looking at Libby as a starter, which I said it, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what route they would take with that. But Matz is the most movable, which is where we've come full circle. That's what we said at the beginning of the spring. And then we're like, it's the Cardinals. They'll never do it. And then they did it. Credit to him. This is a transition year type of move. Arguably the first one we've seen all off season because they couldn't trade Arenado when they tried to. So I think there are so many directions this thing could still go. But let me know, Cardinals fans, like, obviously every move the Cardinals make, people are going to have their negative thoughts about it, and they're going to say, this organization doesn't know what they're doing. Tell me specifically what bothers you. Does it bother you that we don't know who's playing, or Gorman or Burleson? They'll figure it out. They'll have to. Victor Scott made them. Victor Scott forced their hand with that. And I don't think Burleson is going to be the odd man out. I think it's more so Gorman. I think Walker, does he struggle early? Do they send him down? Because they're not going to bench him, but would they send down Walker if he struggles early to Memphis to get the at-bats again, because they got to play the guys that are, that are cooking at the big league level? How long will the runway really be for Walker and Gorman? We're going to find out. But guess what? Victor Scott is another young player that's getting runway because he earned it. Isn't that what we want? We want performance to dictate what your opportunity is. It's interesting. It's compelling. I don't really have an argument against it. I hope Walker comes out and he's gangbusters, and so there's no conversation about, squeezing him for playing time. But Victor Scott is, earned the opportunity to join this race as well. And so that's what the Cardinals decided to do. I think it's all extremely interesting stuff. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Maybe even late Sunday night, not promising, but maybe it would be a good night for a live stream to discuss some of the roster stuff and take your questions and comments about it. Let me know in the comments of this YouTube video if you want that later on Sunday night, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, something like that. I've got a bowling tournament tonight, but afterwards, after toddler bedtime and stuff, that might be a possibility tonight. It might be worth it. Let me know if you want it. Let me know if you're excited. Let me know if you're pissed. Let me know what you think about these moves. As McGreevy misses, Liberatore, the surprise entrant into the rotation at the last minute, they did what they arguably should have done with Steven Matz, even if it's not totally fair to him because he did pitch well, but they're prioritizing the future over the veteran, over the status, over the contract, and in many ways the contract works against Matz in this case. Victor Scott, he made the team. He should have. He's going to, and he's going to be in the opening day lineup. What that means for Gorman, Walker, Burleson, and others will remain to be seen. Siani, you're on the team. I think the biggest winner of all of this is Michael Siani, because there was a case to be made that Victor earned the job over him, and so they just weren't going to carry that additional outfielder that kind of is redundant. But I think there's a way to look at it where it's not redundant to have Siani and Vic on the same team. Cardinals were really good in one-run games last year. Having an outfield at the end of games where you're up by one that can consist of those two guys plus Newpar, I think helps this pitching staff be able to close out more of those games. So there's a window into this where the Cardinals actually make out of this thing okay. But we'll talk about it maybe more on Sunday night. Let me know if you want that. And wrapping up this edition of B-Schaeff Daily thusly. Make sure, again, Kevin Foley, Universal Windows Direct. Give him a call or a text, 618-520-1234 today. Schedule that free estimate. And they've got great deals going on as well. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free. So make sure to contact Kevin. Like I said, big Cardinal fan. So it's a great way to support a fellow Cardinal fan and support the show. Make it worthwhile for Kevin to partner up with us on B-Schaeff Daily. All right. Appreciate you guys as always. We'll talk to you next time on the show. Peace.